Welcome. So this is just a short video looking at 20 mark questions for the AQA Sociology paper 2. I've designed it really just to introduce a little bit about 20 markers on paper 2, give you a rough outline of what to expect, what to try and include, and towards the end of this I'm also going to put some feedback on a divorce trends 20 mark question. So break it down and look at some ideas to include. So the key points for these 20 mark questions. So you need to spend about 30 minutes on the question. Don't spend any more than 30 minutes because then it eats into the time for other questions. The questions will always follow this line of apply material from item or item B and your knowledge, evaluate, and then the question in front of it. The question expects you to use the item. That's a key part of that question, is using material from the item. So try and make sure you do use it. The essay gives you an opportunity to explore relevant issues in more detail, to create more of a discussion using a range of evidence and arguments. Include a brief introduction. So this is always essential. Start the essay off with a brief intro. Use it to define or outline and explain the topic of the question, and you can use elements of the item in your introduction if need be. You need a conclusion, and you need to have some clear summary or finish to your answer. Now this is vital, particularly if you want to get into the top band. Try to answer the question based on the evidence that you've provided. You don't need to repeat everything you've said. You don't need to regurgitate your whole essay again, but try to summarize. What's the key theme of your answer? What is the general tone of your argument? Does it agree or disagree with the question that's been presented? And generally you're going to try and agree with the question, but you know, what have you found? And roughly you're aiming for about 4 paragraphs, 4 arguments, in addition to the intro and conclusion. So intro, 4 paragraphs, conclusion. Think of this as almost what you would do if you were given a 10 mark item question, but you're going to double it. So 4 paragraphs. Generally the first 3 paragraphs I like to sort of tend to have those in agreement with the question, supporting the question, or providing evidence for it. The last paragraph is almost like the evaluative paragraph, so kind of challenging it, thinking about other arguments, other avenues, other issues. So what skills do you need to show in these assessments? So when it comes to most assessments, you've got these 3 criteria: AO1, AO2, AO3, and they're based on knowledge and understanding, application, and analysis. Now, knowledge is basically using your sociological language, going beyond common sense, everyday language, being precise, being accurate. It's using the sociology. So concepts, theories, names, policies, contemporary issues, this would all be part of knowledge. And ultimately, when it comes to knowledge, you need to show clear, accurate, and appropriate understanding of the topic. So it's not enough to simply regurgitate everything you've learned from your pack. You need to select what information you're going to use. You need to give enough detail to show the examiner you understand it, but not so much detail that you're basically teaching the examiner what a divorce is, or what the family is, or what a theory is. For AO2, that's about showing your knowledge. So it's making your knowledge relevant to the question. It's applying what you've said to the topic and any materials that you've been provided to use. So using sentences like this suggests that, this shows that, this challenges the idea, is an easy way to kind of apply what you said to the question. So you're not just regurgitating knowledge, you're saying this is the information, this is its relevance. So in AO2, you've been given an item, particularly in these 20 markers. So this will be where your application skill comes in partly. So simply repeating, rewriting, paraphrasing the item is not applying it. To apply it, you need to do something with it. So to apply an item, you need to show you understand it by linking it to a theory, to a concept, to an idea, building on the item and using it to develop your own knowledge and information. So it's about trying to expand on what's been presented. And then AO3 has analysis and evaluation. Now this is a tricky one. A lot of people find this tricky, particularly analysis. So this is about breaking your parts down, building a point, making a chain of logic or chain of reasoning, and weighing up the strengths and weaknesses of the evidence. So you can use sentences like furthermore, however, this point can be linked to. Now, if we're looking at analysis, and again, as I said, it's a tricky concept. A lot of students struggle with what analysis actually is. So I'm going to put the command words of the paper, have it defined as separate information or separate information into compartments, identify their characteristics. What this means is break an argument down into its core elements. So explain how, why, who, what, when, where, the concept, the trend, the thinker, the theory has impacted on the topic. So it's planning the journey. How do you get from the knowledge of what's happening to the impact it's having on this other issue? It's almost plotting out the route that this information takes. Evaluation is a slightly more straightforward skill for AO3. So it isn't just listing strengths and weaknesses. Now, again, you do need to know strengths and weaknesses, but it isn't just simply listing off a pro and con list at the end of a paragraph. You know, as with analysis, you need to say why. Why is it considered a strength? Why is your point considered a weakness? And again, part of this can come from who claims it, criticisms of how a study or piece of research is conducted, when a theory was presented, so is it modern, postmodern, who made the argument, is there any bias involved? And again, part of this is avoiding the idea of bolt-on evaluation, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is the key AO skills. Now there are some other elements to this which are quite helpful to be aware of. So as we've got at the bottom, synoptic thinking. So making connections from one topic to another. So you might have connections built between, as we're going to look at divorce later, you could link that back to change in gender roles and DDOL. You could link it to childhood. You can link it to globalization. So it's trying to think about how the information you have might build on or connect to other areas of the course. Draw back to the key themes: socialization, culture, identity, control, stratification, globalization, inequality. These are key themes throughout the whole 2 years of sociology. So again, these could be included in your points. And also think about the relevance, the usefulness. So when you're thinking about an evidence or an argument, is it relevant today? Is it still applicable today? No, we have as a society changed very dramatically, very rapidly, particularly in the last sort of 10 to 15 years. So some of the things you can consider there would be, is this argument, is this idea relevant? And I think that's really important, particularly when you're looking at maybe a modern perspective, and it's sort of talking about society today. A lot of questions might throw in that word compared to society today. So the skill of evaluation, as I mentioned about the bolt-on evaluation. So when you're evaluating, some of the questions you can ask yourself is, what would another theory say to challenge this point? Is it still relevant today? Can this be applied to all groups, so class, age, gender, ethnicity? And practicing this skill will help you avoid, as I said, the bolt-on evaluation, simply listing all the evidence that criticises or agrees with what you've said. Now, as you can see here, just a couple of examples of what would be a bolt-on evaluation and a good evaluation for the question, evaluate the view the nuclear family is in decline. So we'll look at just a couple just to demonstrate this point. So a bolt-on evaluation might be saying that new right thinkers claim that nuclear family is under threat. So that's kind of just a bolt-on. You've made your argument and you've said the new right agree. A good evaluation is doing something with that. So it's not just a random sentence bolted onto the end of the paragraph and that's your evaluation. They've got here, new right thinkers agree, claim traditional nuclear family, which is referring back to the question, is under threat due to over-generous welfare state, encourages alternatives. It's like single parent families, claiming benefits, and the nuclear family, or supporting the idea of the nuclear family, is indeed in decline. So again, it's not just a bolt-on statement, it's been applied to the question, to the previous points that were made. Second one, feminists think the nuclear family is a negative as it upholds patriarchal ideology, which is almost, if you think it's just an AO1, it's just a bit of knowledge. The good evaluation is saying that radical feminists may be more useful than the right, arguing that they claim the increase in numbers. So again, it's about making sure that you're not just bolting on a random sentence and hoping that that will count as evaluation. You're making the evaluation relevant. Why have you put it in? Why are you using it? What's it got to do with the question? So to look at these 20 mark evaluate questions, the good paragraph structure, things that you could do. So we've got this peel argument. So make your point in the same way that you would do your reason, your factor, your point for a 10 marker. one way, another way, one argument, one view is this. Then move on to evidence. So what study, theory, concept, statistic have you got to demonstrate or support the view you've made? Explain kind of does overlap a little bit with the analysis. So go into more detail, unpack it. Although, furthermore, in addition, this links to this because, however, this for, therefore. Evaluation, again, is just coming back to this. So, however, this theory would disagree with this person because of this, and they view that. This links back to the question and suggests and shows, therefore. So we've got the Peel sort of structure. And last but not least, just thinking about the mark scheme itself. And I wanted to look at the mark scheme just to flag up a couple of points about it. So you can see I've put here, I've not included 0, no relevant points, because having done sociology, you can surely come up with one relevant sociological point. But particularly, we can look at these bands. Now, when we look at them, all the bands follow the same point. So first of all, we've got the knowledge. Every band starts off by talking about AO1 knowledge. So you can see at the very top, sound, conceptual, detailed knowledge, going all the way down to very limited knowledge or no understanding of the question. We then have application. So appropriate material will be applied accurately with sensitivity to the issues raised by the question. That's at the very top, all the way down to significant errors or omissions in application of material. And then we have evaluation. Analysis and evaluation will be explicit and relevant. Evaluation may be developed. And again, all the way down to no analysis, no evaluation. And often I realise at the top band, I haven't put it in here, but it often will say a clear conclusion is drawn. Now, if we look at these top two, the sort of the 13 to 16 to 17 to 20, I wanted just to highlight the difference between these two and the difference between a good and a very good answer. Now, the first thing with this is we look at the wording. So in the 13 to 16, largely accurate, quite broad, quite deep, or broad or deep, but it's incomplete. So you've got a lot of relevant information. You've talked about a lot of key ideas, but it's just might be a bit vague, could be unclear, unfinished, or may have some gaps in it. In terms of application, it's largely explicit and relevant. So all the way through, it's generally the right information, it's the right topic, it's the right theme, but the relevance may not always be emphasized. And some material may be inadequately focused. So again, that possibility of drifting off on a tangent without any relevance to the question. And then some explicit or limited evaluation. So that's the kind of the 13, 16, but that's a good answer. But to push it into a very good, what we need to have is that sound, conceptual, detailed knowledge. So that means you've got lots of concepts, you've got lots of key thinkers, key ideas, key themes, and it's clear, accurate, and pretty solid. Material will be applied accurately. So again, the information you've included, you have applied it to the question. You have made the relevance of it clear. And as it says, the sensitivity to issues raised by the question. So what you've been saying, you've made that clear point. This shows that, this links to this shows the question or this idea or this theme because. And then analysis and evaluation, again, will always be explicit and relevant. And evaluation may be developed. So again, it's not just the bolt-on of here's a random point, I'll just stick it on the end of the paragraph. This is the evaluation because by this person, and they think this. So let's take a look at a question on Family's paper. So obviously, if you haven't had a go at this 20 marker, do have a try. Do take a look at the breakdown and think about how you're going to approach it. For my class, I know this is a homework task this week, and hopefully this might help with the question. Now, the first thing I like to do with any 20 marker is I like to read the question and break the question down first. I know some people like to read the item first, but I prefer to look at the question to figure out what we're doing. Now, with the question, if we look at it here, the first bit is apply material from the item, use your knowledge, evaluate. These are the key words of every 20 mark question from the Family and Beliefs paper. So we need to use that item, we need to use our knowledge, And evaluate looks at the strengths and weaknesses, both sides of an argument. Now, what we want to focus on is these other key words. So the first thing we're evaluating, the first thing we're trying to understand and provide evidence of is sociological contributions to our understanding. So how do sociology, or how do sociologists help us to understand something in society? This is always a really good phrase. This sociological contributions to our understanding is a good one you can use in every paragraph. So a way of linking to the question. So this sociological contribution helps us to understand divorce or whatever the question's about because, and there's a way of tying your answer to the question. So the next bit is we're looking at trends, which is whether they've gone up or down. We're looking at divorce, which is the legal termination of a marriage. And we're looking at the United Kingdom since 1970. So we've got a time scale, the last 50 years. Now, this isn't too much an issue so much for divorce because a lot of the key changes of divorce began around 1969 with the introduction of divorce reform law. So although it's 1969, it's before the 1970 time scale. Being just a year under should be okay, but also the fact that it was introduced in 1969, but it became effective in 1971. So it didn't really start until 1971. So it's kind of then fits into our time scale. It's a 20 marker. So as I said, we need 30 minutes, 4 paragraphs, an intro and a conclusion. And looking at the item itself, there are some key facts in the item, key starting points. So the item tells us that divorce has significantly increased since the 1970s. Which is a fact in itself. We've got changes in the law being cited for part of the increase. Sociologists have given other reasons. Again, that's what we're kind of trying to explain with this question. How do sociologists explain the change? And it does give us the idea that the decline in traditional norms about marriage has been part of this. And obviously that's led to less stigmatization of divorce. So let's take a look at 2 paragraphs from this question. One was a top band and one was a lower band. Now the top band answer for this, the whole question was around 17 out of 20. The lower band answer was about 6 out of 20. Now the difference, obviously I'm going to look at some of the differences in their paragraphs. The lower band answer, the paragraph itself is not a bad one. It's not the paragraph, this paragraph itself that kind of brought the look grade down. The answer only had kind of half an answer provided. But there are some differences between the two, and again I wanted to flag those up. So if we take a look at AO1, AO2, AO3, as you mentioned in the top band, so you can see with the top band answer it starts off with a lot of AO2. So they've basically talked about second reason, because this is the second paragraph of the answer. They've talked about divorce rates, they've used the item, and they've used an element of the item as the starting point for their paragraph. The bits in blue is AO1. It's kind of factual information. So it talks about in the 1970s, or since the 1970s, which actually probably could be more of an AO2 because it's referencing the question. But it talks about change in expectations. It talks about postmodernism. It talks about individualization. So it's a bit of knowledge. It then comes back into AO2 where they've talked about how the shame of divorce is no longer there. This could lead to an increase in divorce. Because people don't feel judged or embarrassed to stay together. There could be slightly more specific or slightly clearer applications to question, emphasising how that's led to divorce going up, but that's a minor element. We then have a little bit more knowledge, which does again kind of come from the item. So it's talking about secularization, declining influence of the church, and how this has led to people not seeing divorce as a sin. Again, a little bit maybe, therefore this means that divorce has increased, would be kind of quite good here, but again, still good paragraph. And then the evaluation at the bottom is not just a random bolt on saying, however, divorce, not everyone gets divorced. It's a clear, many couples stay in empty shell marriages, and I've put it as an evaluation. I quite like it because it's questioning the validity of the data or how reliable the data would be. Because again, the idea that there are people who stay in empty shell marriages as opposed to getting divorced for various reasons. So it's more about questioning the accuracy of the data. Now the second paragraph, the lower band one, you can see the slight difference that it starts off by sort of referencing the question. So it talks about increase in divorce, but one big gap here is the item. It doesn't mention the item, even though what is being suggested is effectively from the item, you know, the norms about relationships and marriage. And it does kind of use almost the same words. So decrease in traditional norms, decline in traditional norms. So it needs to reference the item. The middle part of the question, it talks a lot about religion, culture. It talks about how divorce was frowned upon. People couldn't leave. It talks about the Divorce Reform Act and how that eased tensions. But it doesn't really go on to say how that's then led to a change in divorce. It doesn't say this, therefore, this led to an increase in divorce. So that's one thing this argument could do and develop itself, is provide an application back to the question. And the last but not least, it does have an evaluation. So it says that it does not change the fact that there are still religions which heavily look down on divorce and prioritize marriage. So it's a bit of a bolt-on marriage. And that could be kind of extended to say, you know, we take a very Christocentric view, so we look at divorce, and the UK looks at divorce like from this Christian view that secularization's happened because of Christianity going down. But this is, you know, a European phenomenon, other countries around the world. But again, because we're looking at the UK, it needs a bit more clarity in what it's actually saying. You know, what is it about religion in the UK that means that marriage is still seen as favourably as they suggest? Another thing I wanted to flag up was concepts. So looking at the top band, lots of concepts here: divorce rate, postmodernism, individualisation, secularisation, empty shell relationships. If you look at the low band answer, you've got Divorce Act, and it should be Divorce Reform Law. So the name's sort of slightly inaccurate. And then it's got cultures, which again, I've allowed cultures because it is a key concept. It's not really explored in the sense it's being used in a sort of quite a general way, but the conceptual difference is key in these two. And then last but not least, just some tips really. So for 20 markers, make sure you include some contemporary relevant issues or theories if appropriate, and if you know any to hand. Don't panic if you don't know something contemporary. If you know something, put it in, but if you can't think of anything, don't panic. Make sure your structure is clear. As the introduction, you know, you need clear paragraphs, you need a clear conclusion. Avoid a shopping list where you just start listing off paragraphs with, you know, Parsons, Wilmot and Young, Dirk, you know, these. Try and have an argument. Concepts are key. Try and make sure you focus on the question. You're not just generally talking about the topic area. Consider how appropriate every idea you're discussing is, and that can easily form part of the evaluation. You know, you might spend some time talking about Parsons and his theory in a functionalism essay. You know, you can then go on to say, however, this theory isn't particularly strong, or this theory is outdated, or this theory lacks supportive evidence. And then last but not least, consider methods, core themes, and globalization when relevant. Okay, so a little bit of a discussion there of 20 markers. Hopefully this was of some help, and thanks for watching.